Okay, hello. This is once again your friend Ellen Weatherford, and I'm here with our new buddy, one of my favorite people ever that I have rapidly come to develop an appreciation for. We have Dr. Oné Pagán. Say hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm really excited to be talking to you, and I'm really excited to learn about the really cool animal that we have today. But before we dig into this animal, I would like it if you could kind of introduce yourself a little bit and let our buddies at home know who we're talking to.
Well, absolutely. First of all, let me thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a proud nerd, biology nerd, so I love talking about what I love. It goes with the territory. By profession, I'm a professor of biology at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. I was also a non-traditional student, meaning that I went back to school at 35 for my PhD. So I did my bachelor's and my master's at the University of Puerto Rico, and that was in the 1980s. Don't tell anyone. And then I worked after the bachelor's. I worked after the master's. I was already married, and I had kids. My wife helped a little bit, and I needed to work. I had a family. So, but I always wanted to do a PhD, and I love science. And I got the opportunity to work as a technician at a medical school in Puerto Rico. And that's where I found so many people who actually believed in me, trained me very well in the sciences. And then a collaborator of my mentors in Puerto Rico came to the university. Okay. This gentleman, his name was Professor George Hess. He was at Cornell University, and he recruited people for their graduate programs. So he kind of recruited me. I applied, I got a scholarship, and basically I told my wife, it's Cornell University, and then we have two kids at the time, so we packed pretty much everyone and we went, and that was at 35 years old. And when I saw Cornell for the first time, the tower and everything, that was my Hogwarts, if you know what I mean. I'm a childlike fascination with science, and some people outgrow dinosaurs and everything. I never did. Okay, so eventually I finished my PhD in pharmacology with an emphasis on neurobiology. And we'll talk about how I got into my favorite animal model in a few minutes, I hope.
It is that payoff of that childhood passion, right? Too. It's like you're just like, a lot of people have an idea when they're a little kid of what they want to be when they grow up. Like you want to be like an astronaut, or you want to be a ballerina or something like that. And then somewhere along the way, you kind of like, maybe something else is a little more realistic. But boy, when like to just like get there, to get that culmination of that lifelong dream, I think is just a really exciting idea.
No, thank you. And I can tell you a story about that. I don't actually remember it, but apparently when I was about maybe 4 or 5 years old, I asked my mom whether God created microscopes. Okay. What kid does that?
Did she have a good answer for you?
Yes, she did. She actually said, well, no, God didn't create microscopes, but gave people the brains to invent them. And that was a very appropriate answer for a 5-year-old. Okay, so again, I don't remember that, but just to show that there was never any doubt that I will end up doing something scientific.
And, from what I've heard, Cornell is an awesome place to kind of see that through. A lot of the information that we use when we're researching for this show, a lot of that comes from Cornell.
Yeah, no. It's a great place. It's cold, really cold in the winter. That's actually the first place where I ever saw snow, but it's a great place. And I have very good memories, and especially from Dr. Hess ended up being my advisor. And he passed about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He was 90 something, but his mind was always there. He kept working virtually up to the last minute. So he was a scientist.
And this journey has led you to the animal that we're talking about today, which is Planarians. And I'm really excited about this because this is an animal that I'm fully prepared to admit. I first heard the word planarian less than a year ago. And actually, I'll give people a little bit of backstory here. What happened was about a year ago, we moved into this house that we're in now, and I walked into my kitchen, and there's something on the floor. And I look at it, and it is a worm, but it's not a worm I've ever seen before. It's brown. It's like a tan brown color. It has a thin black stripe all the way down its back. And its head is kind of flayed out into this hammerhead shape. And me and my husband are looking at it, and we're like, what on earth is that? I had never seen anything like it. We're so confused. So I get out my phone, of course. I take pictures of it. I post it on Twitter. Somebody on Twitter tagged you and said, check it out, and gave me the information that it was a planarian. And that was my first time ever hearing of one, that there was one sitting on my kitchen floor. So I had been following you since that, but
Thank you.
which is awesome, because I've learned a lot just through like following your Twitter activity. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So okay. For people who probably like me a year ago have never heard of a planarian, what is it?
Okay, well, planarian means literally flatworm. Flatworm is a rather wide term because there's many flatworms out there. So the ones that we're going to talk about today will belong to a specific type of class of worms that can live in 3 different habitats, like the terrestrial ones, like the ones you found, marine ones, and freshwater ones, okay? The marine ones are really beautiful. They're very colorful. They're called polyclads. And not only they're beautiful and colorful, they can also be poisonous. They can, in general, in nature, if an animal that is squishy, slow, not very big, but very bright, that stands out in the environment, it can kill you with poison. Okay, so that's a rule to live by, as it were. So the terrestrial ones can also be very beautiful, and some of them are poisonous, not the one that you found. But in Europe, for example, there's some that are like cobalt blue. I mean, they're beautiful. And they are actually agricultural pests because they eat earthworms, and they can actually wreak havoc with agriculture and activities like that. Now, the ones that I do work with are the freshwater type. The freshwater type, they are, first of all, they're predators. Actually, all planarians are predators, and they will eat anything that they can hunt, including each other. Okay, so that they're cannibals even. Many planarian species, which is one of the most, amazing things about them, have a very remarkable characteristic. If you cut their heads off, they will regrow a new head with a complete brain, fully formed in the right way. Okay, so if you can imagine, if we learn how to do that, to reconstitute brains in the right way, imagine people, for example, that have brain damage to a car accident or Alzheimer's or any developmental disorders. Okay, so we don't know exactly how many planarians are able to do that. Not all species can, but many do. And they are master survivors, as it were. They are very easy to kill. Don't get me wrong. You can squish them. You can kill them with chemicals. But other than that, there's many characteristics that makes them master survivors.
Oh, awesome. We're going to get into that in our ratings, because if this is your first time listening to our show, what we do is we review and rate animals out of 10.
Oh, I've been following you too. So.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad. I feel so famous. So with the planarians that you study, when you're studying them, what exactly is it that you're looking at in them? Like, what are you trying to learn about them?
Okay, so I need to make a confession first, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let's hear it.
I came to planarians by accident because, again, my training was in biochemistry and pharmacology. I never took a zoology course in my life. I knew about planarians from high school biology. I knew that you cut them off, they will regenerate, but I didn't know anything about that. Actually, in university, I was not very interested in animals at all. I'm sorry to hear. I know this is your thing, but I redeemed myself. when I was doing my PhD, I was studying cocaine, an abuse drug, using a cell-based system, and I was in a physical chemistry lab. Okay, so we didn't use animals, we didn't use anything like that, just biochemistry and physical chemistry and pharmacology, of course. I saw a paper that came from a researcher at Temple University that described how he could get planarians addicted to cocaine. And that actually blew my mind because I immediately saw the opportunity to test some of the compounds that I was testing in Planarians. So I went to my advisor and I said, George, we have to use the Planarians. I can do that for my thesis and whatnot. So, but my former advisor, God bless him, he was a hardcore physical chemist. So animals, squishy things, come on. No, and he said, actually, well, when you have your own lab, you can do that. And that's precisely what I did.
Get them.
Yeah. So about 6 months before I graduated, I was hired at Westchester University, which was fate, as I like to say, because as I told you, I began my PhD at 35. I was about to finish it at 40. I didn't want to do a postdoc. I just wanted to go to work. So a little bit before 6 months before graduation, I started sending applications to universities. And I sent like, listen, I have this many papers, I have experience, I will graduate from my PhD at that time. Would you consider me? Okay. And I sent it to 5 places. 2 of those places, I'm still waiting to hear from them. Okay. So that was about 15 years ago.
They're still getting to it.
Yeah. Two places said thank you, but no thank you. And that's fair. But Westchester University, look at my application. They brought me in for interviews and whatnot. And eventually I got hired. And after the fact, I was very surprised because, I was happy. Don't get me wrong. I accepted the offer and everything. But I asked the now chair of the department what made the difference because they kind of trust me that I would finish the PhD and everything. First, they did something a little sneaky. When they decided that they wanted to hire me, they called my advisor and told them, listen, we want to hire Oné. Can you guarantee that he will graduate by the next fall? And he said, yes, yeah, he's finished, he's writing. The funny thing is that when I got the offer, I went to George again. Guess what? And I said something inappropriate, but which I'm not going to repeat. But I was hired and everything. And he sat back and said, I knew about that a week ago.
They spoiled it. They spoiled the surprise.
Yeah. And then I was hired. And then I asked the now chair what made the difference. And he said, listen, when you came in for your research seminar and your teaching demonstration, because we have to do both. And in the teaching demonstration, they give you a topic of their own choosing a week in advance, and you have to build a class, a lecture about that. And the person said, listen, you didn't lecture, you taught. And I was like, wow, and that was teaching wise. Then I wanted to develop a research project. And of course, it was to be about planarians. All right. So, and as I said, I never took a course in them. I didn't know zoology. I didn't know. So one thing that I'm kind of good at is educating myself, as it were. So I start reading. I'm a bookworm. Okay. That comes with the territory. I educated myself on planarians, behaviors, and everything because most people use planarian for regeneration and developmental biology research. I use them for pharmacology, meaning that I test substances that may serve as antagonists, as it were, against abuse drugs. Okay. In my laboratory, we test cocaine, nicotine, several substances, and we are actually developing a relatively new field called the pharmacology of regeneration. So, in a nutshell, if you ask me, what I do is to give drugs to worms and see what happens.
I would have never thought, I'm finding out now that apparently it's very common for biology classes to use planarians as like little dissection, like lessons in
Uh-huh.
regeneration, stuff like that. But I never had that. That was never anything that I had a chance to do. So I never would have thought to use worms as a research model to see what happens when you expose them to drugs. So that sounds very exciting, and it sounds like you would see a lot of surprising stuff.
Absolutely. In fact, when our very first paper on planarians from my own lab came from an unexpected source. You know that when you do an experiment, you need to do your appropriate controls, right? So, and as any half decent scientist, I was doing the controls for my experiments. I was testing a substance that did not dissolve very well in water, and I was using a specific solvent. So when I ran the controls with just the solvent, we observed something weird. The planarians slowed down in the presence of the solvent. We can talk about the behaviors that I measure in them in a moment, but they did slow down. So I decided to stop everything, tell my research students, which as at the time, my very first laboratory consisted of three research students. Three of them were girls, okay? And this is a message that I have for all the girls out there. So girls can do science and math very well, okay? So those three women, they're grown women right now. One of them is a neurologist, a clinical neurologist. A second one is a PhD neuroscientist, and the third one is a nurse. So how proud I am of them. But I digress. So we did the experiments with the solvent, and it did have certain acute effects on the planarian, and we published it. That was the very first paper from our own research lab. As an aside, the compound, not the solvent, the compound that we began to test, we developed it, and it turned out to be kind of an antidote against cocaine in planarians. And it works on rats too. And eventually ended up with me getting a tattoo of the compound.
I love that.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you the story, and I can send you a picture of the tattoo. Don't worry, it's in my arm, and it's called parthenolite. I told you that I have three kids. My daughter, it's 29, and I have two boys, 22 and 18. My daughter wanted to get a tattoo, and she wanted for me to go with her for support and whatever. And she said, "Dad, why don't you get a tattoo as well?" Mind you, I was 54 at the time. That was last year. And I thought about it and I said, "Well, okay." So, and I thought about it, and that compound means a lot to me because I've written a few papers on that, a book, you know, and I did it at 55, and we went together. It was a really cool bonding experience. She got a tattoo related to psychology. She's a psychologist, and it was fun.
Cool scientist and cool dad.
Yeah, you.
That's awesome. So now that we have kind of like an idea of the sort of work that you're doing with planarians, let's start to look at our ratings for these planarians. You mentioned that we're talking about a specific class. Did you say a specific class of planarians?
Freshwater planarians of various species.
Awesome.
We only use two of them, which are commercially available. You can buy them from suppliers, but they are the freshwater types.
Awesome. If this is your first time listening, we rate animals, and our first category that we rate them in is effectiveness, which we define for our purposes as physical adaptations that an animal has that let it do a good job of the things it's trying to do. So these could be things, these are things that are built into its body that maybe make them good at surviving, good at evading predators, good at apprehending their own food. So for these planarians, what would you rate them out of 10 for effectiveness?
I'll give them a 9.5.
That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty good for a variety of reasons. Let's suppose that first of all, the ones that I work with, again, they're freshwater planarians. They're small, maybe a couple of inches long tops. Many of them are way smaller than that. And they are worms. They're squishy. They're not particularly fast. These types are not poisonous at all. So what do they do to defend themselves? Couple of things. They hide. That's one thing. They like to be in dark places. And I'm also a science fiction fan, so I like to say that they're always in the dark side, as it were. So, but let's suppose that there's a fish who gets a hold of one of those planarians and bites a little piece out of it. That planarian will not die. The piece that is left will regenerate into a whole body. Okay, so that lets the worm survive to live another day. And that process, remarkably, can happen for all intents and purposes indefinitely. In some planarian species, there doesn't seem to be a limit for regeneration. And another thing, they don't seem to get old.
Like ever.
Yeah, no, ever. Some species, the markers for senescence are not present there. And many people, not my lab, but many people are studying why that is so. Okay. And they reproduce in two main ways. The usual way, okay, they are hermaphrodites. They have both sexes in them. But also, depending on the population density, they can latch on to the bottom of the pond or something like that, and they hold on to their life. The rest of the body keeps stretching and stretching and stretching until it breaks. Each half then develops into a new worm. So they have those two types of reproduction strategies. I didn't give them the full 10 because they're easy to kill. They can be squished. They can be killed with chemicals. Okay. But it's pretty good. I mean, 95% is an egg. So, yeah.
So when you cut a piece off of a planarian, the regeneration works both ways? Both pieces regenerate, so you now have two?
Absolutely. And you can actually cut the planarian in, 200 little pieces. And with proper nutrition, and if you leave them alone, eventually each piece will regrow a new planarian.
I am so glad that when we found one in our kitchen, we did not try to chop it up. Because, I looked it up. So the one that we had in our kitchen ended up being an invasive species where we live in Florida.
Yes.
And so the recommendation from what I found was to kill it if you found it. Because, Florida is, we've talked about this before, Florida is like one of the biggest hit places in the U.S. by invasive species. And so, this little guy was just running around. And so the thing on it said that we were supposed to it said humanely euthanize them. And I could not bring myself to do it. I was like, I get that it's the right thing to do, but I really don't have the heart to do it.
I know.
So I just gave it to my husband. I was like, here, you figure it out. You do something with this. But I'm really glad I didn't try to chop it into pieces, because then that would have made the problem even worse.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that they're predators and that they're eating other little things. I'm assuming things that are smaller than them. Where is the opening through which they take their food in? Like, how do they eat?
Okay, so they have a mouth, but not in the place that you would expect it to be. They can sprout from near the middle of their bodies, where we would have our belly buttons, okay? A tube called a proboscis, just like the alien in a movie, something like that. And that can latch on to the prey and suck it dry. So, and I've seen planarians wrap themselves around like water fleas, like snake, and do that. And it gets worse. They excrete their waste products through the same orifice.
All right. One door, enter and exit. Are you sure that's a real animal? This sounds like a science fiction alien. This doesn't sound like something that exists on our planet.
No, I promise you they're real.
It sounds like something you would hear about in Star Trek or something like that.
You're my kind of person.
The thing that I was reading about the little worm that I found in my house said that they eat snails. And that was very confusing to me, because I was like, how can a worm eat a snail? A snail is very tough.
Because they can actually insert their proboscis in the opening of the snail's shell. And they can actually suck it dry from the inside.
It's like an ice cream cone that it just has that hard exterior and you just slurp it right out.
Absolutely. And again, they also eat earthworms. They are hunters. And that's part of the reason why they have a relatively highly developed brain.
And how is it that they hunt? Like, by what means do they sort of like perceive and detect their prey? Can they see? Can they hear? Like, what is their sensory experience like?
And mainly olfactory, as far as I understand it. They don't see very well. They can see light and dark, okay, that differences, but they cannot form an image. Their eyes are too simple for that. They don't have a lens. They don't have anything like that. So it's mainly olfactory. I suppose that the terrestrial ones, they can actually feel vibrations in the ground and everything, but I'm just speculating this time. But I do know that the freshwater planarians, they can hunt by smell, and furthermore, they can flee away from predators by smell. If you put, for example, the scent of a frog in the water, they swim away from that. Okay, so they detect things from an olfactory way. And funnily enough, their olfactory organs are located where we would have our ears. And so they have something called the auricles, and they look like ears, but those are the chemoreceptors that they use to detect chemicals in the environment.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool because I would have expected them to just be kind of like, squiggling around on the ground with very little sense of where to go or sense of direction or anything. But they're a little more directed than
Yep.
I thought they were.
Predators have to be smarter than prey. So that's, the way nature works.
That's awesome. So that is a great transition into our next category for ratings, which for us is ingenuity. We define ingenuity as behavioral adaptations that let an animal solve problems that it faces every day, or these are like clever things, maybe strategies it uses, things that it does with its body to make it do a good job of the thing it's doing. I know that's a super eloquent way of saying it, very sciencey. But so what would you give these planarians for ingenuity?
I give them a 10
Oh, wow.
because, first of all, they're invertebrates, and invertebrates in general tend to be underrated in nature. Okay, so even when you call somebody spineless, it's an insult. Okay, so that's and nothing is farther from the truth because, for example, planarians, they have a relatively developed brain with many similarities to our own, not only biochemically and physiologically, but also shape-wise. They have the two lobes that we have, but there's a difference. You know that in the case of vertebrates like us, we have one brain, two lobes, and one spinal cord. Planarians have two, one per brain lobe. And those spinal cords, they are joined together by nerve endings. So that's part of the reason why they tend to display highly sophisticated behaviors. We already talked a little bit about how they reproduce when the population density is too different or whenever they need it. They hide from predators using light and dark by smelling the environment. They hunt by, again, smelling the environment and whatnot. And we have this, by we, I mean the scientific community. They can form memories, and they can be trained to respond to a small electric stimulus like you would do with a rat. But even more surprisingly, if you train a planarian to respond to a light or something like that, you cut their head off. When you regrow their head, the head remembers, the body remembers. So where does the memory was stored? It was not in the brain completely, at least. They have many surprisingly sophisticated behavioral strategies to survive. They're, again, master survivors.
First of all, that's very surprising, that like where we would expect the neural activity associated with memories to be stored in like where we would assume your head to be, like what we think of as your brain, because we think, well, that's the way it works in us, right? All of your memories and behavior and stuff is stored in your head. But so then like coming across an animal where it's not that way, it's stored somewhere else, then that is very surprising. But also, so I want to talk a little bit more about their memories because I don't think we hear a lot about memory retention in invertebrates in general, particularly the little ones. You know, like people talk about memories and learning in cephalopods and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. That's a little bit bigger, but you don't usually hear about it in the little guys. So how long can their memories last, and like how complex can they get?
It depends on the species. Granted, they don't recall for a long time. We're talking about weeks, maybe. Their training, as far as I understand it. I don't run those kinds of experiments, but based on my readings, that's kind of the limit. Okay. They also don't remember exactly very sophisticated things, okay? Meaning in a funny way that they cannot solve an equation or anything like that. But then again, neither did I at some point in my life. So,
I was gonna say, like, I can't dock them too much for that.
yeah, so. But they can actually remember. And that's, again, another characteristic of survival. Because if they, at the very least, know and remember that a dark place is safer for them and a lighted place is a little more dangerous, sometimes that's enough to allow them to survive. So, granted, they are not capable of, I don't know, complex behaviors or solving mazes and things like that. But yeah, they have a pretty good memory for a brain that it's I don't know, a couple of cubic millimeters big.
They're packing a lot of power in a small little device. So you mentioned earlier that you were looking at the responses they were having to different chemical stimulants like cocaine, and the different solvents that you were using caused them to like behave differently. I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Like, how are they responding to these different chemicals?
Okay, so basically in my lab we use several behaviors to measure the response of a chemical. Planarians glide, and they glide at the bottom of the dish or at the bottom of, and that's how they move. There are substances that can speed them up. There are substances that will slow them down, and we can actually quantify those movements. Some other substances, when they are given at relatively high concentrations, they cause seizures. The planarians begin to twitch, and you can count how many twitches per concentration, so you can quantify that. Also, we can take advantage of the preference for dark places against light places. We can get a petri dish, cover half of them with black electric tape, and when you put a planarian there, it will spend about 80% of the time in the shaded side. That's actually a very interesting model for people who study planarians as a model for anxiety, believe it or not. Because when they gave them antidepressants, that doesn't affect their motility, but they spend more time in the light side, meaning that they are more relaxed. This is a phenomenon that is very common in rats. Rats react in that way. Also, as far as abuse substances are concerned, when you give them nicotine, for example, you put nicotine in the water or cocaine or any abuse drug, and you leave it there for a certain period of time and you take it away, they react as if they were addicted. They get the shakes, they start shaking, they start going like head pops, like looking around for something that is in there. They swim like crazy, they go corkscrewing. And we can quantify those behaviors to say in a rather anthropomorphic way that they were addicted. So my own line of research is to induce those behaviors in the planarians and see if my compounds can prevent or rescue the planarians from the abuse drugs. Eventually, over time, they will get back to normal, to their own peaceful gliding and everything. But that gives us a very good model to at least behaviorally try to ascertain the effect of abuse drugs. And actually, one of the things that I'm trying to get into now is to go back to my biochemical roots and try to analyze the specific receptors in the planarian brain responsible for the effects of cocaine, nicotine, things like that. Because even though the nervous system of planarians is very similar to ours, there are some fundamental differences biochemically. Some receptors in human can make a human more active, but in the planarian, more relaxed. So we have to study them in that way, which is exciting because that's what science thrives on something unknown to be discovered.
That's always the part that gets me really excited. I say this a lot on the show because a lot of times when I talk to guests, a lot of times the answer is I don't know. And that's my favorite, is
Yeah,
because that's like, that's still left out there unsolved. So that's still an opportunity for learning. And this is another kind of, maybe it's a weird question, but within the planarians, how much like variety is there in the behavior from one planarian to the next, in terms of, do some of them prefer different things from others of the same species? I guess what I'm asking is, do they have personalities?
that's an excellent question, and the answer is yes.
Really?
Because in a normal population, you get 1,000 humans, okay? You know that there's going to be a variety of responses. Some people will like coffee, some people would like tea, some people would like, I don't know, root beer, okay? Things like that. Even in a clonal planarian population, okay, meaning that if you cut a planarian in two, let them grow, then you cut each half in two, so you have four. You can get a clonal population. They're clones of each other. And yet they will express their own behaviors because even though their genetics are the same, the specific connections in their brains are not. In the same way that, again, if you had an identical twin, you are very much like your twin in certain things, but one of you may like one red and one of you may like blue. And that's a reflection of the specific makeup of the brain. So, yeah, they display, again, their own, for lack of a better word, individuality or personality, as you said.
I guess that's probably, something that you want, like over time in order to like progress evolution, you want that variation, right? Like you don't want every single
Absolutely.
one to be exactly the same. Otherwise, you're not going to progress at all. So I like that, even though there are so many differences between how our brain works and how their brain works and how our spines are oriented and how their nervous system is oriented, but there's still some overlap.
Exactly, it's common ground, and that's why we can do biomedical research. We have to understand that all life on Earth is related, and that's why we can do research on animal models, and that's controversial, but it's a necessary thing to do when done humanely, and that's part of the reason why I work in worms too, because I would feel very reluctant to do research in rats and, God forbid, monkeys. You know, so you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. You mentioned that you didn't come from a background of zoology or didn't intend to like work closely with animals, but I feel like planarians are a good gateway animal. It's like if you're not already into animals, it's like, okay, well, here's one that is really cool and it seems like an alien. So it doesn't seem like an animal at first, but
Yeah,
it'll get you there.
absolutely. Yeah. And they are, I mean, I'm very fond of them because I personally believe, and that goes to the next rating that we're going to talk about soon, that they're very cute. Okay. And and that's again is subjective, but I think many people would agree with me in that semi-professional assessment.
Yeah, so the one that we found, at first glance, I don't think I would have described it as cute because I was a little bit confused by it and not expecting it to be there. It was of a very pleasant, like sort of very aesthetically pleasing shape, but I've seen a lot of the ones that like you post pictures of and they're different. They're a different shape. They have sort of an
Yep.
arrowhead sort of shape to them. And is that the same? Like, is that, like you said, the two lobes of the brain that are just making it flare out like that?
Yeah, in many species, yes, most of them are like arrow-headed. They are also cross-eyed for some reason. Most of them, nobody knows why. And but some of them, they have different head shapes. They some of them they you describe the terrestrial planarians as hammerheads, and
Mm-hmm.
that's very much descriptive. There are, I don't know if I sent you the picture of that, but there's a freshwater species that are hammerheads too, and they regenerate weirdly. Remember that I told you that they varied in their ability to regenerate? The hammerhead planarians, the freshwater ones, if you cut their heads off, they regenerate their heads, but tiny heads.
Oh, little
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, little tiny heads. Do you remember the Men in Black movies?
I was a kid. I
Oh,
was
yeah,
like
I
a
know.
little kid.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I do remember them.
Okay. So there was one of them that one of the aliens had a small head of himself
Hmm.
sprouting at the side. So the hammerhead planarians, they regenerate their heads in precisely that way, tiny heads. And it's really funny. I wish I had a picture of that one, but I promise you, when I go back to the lab, because I had to close my lab because of the worldwide situation. Right now, I'm teaching online, but I promise you, if I get a picture of that, I'll send it to you.
Oh, yes. So do they grow back to their original size eventually, or do they just stay tiny?
Eventually, yes, but it takes a lot longer. For example,
Mm.
the brown planarians with the arrow-shaped head that I usually work with, they can regenerate a full head in a week, as if nothing happened. Moreover, their heads, they glide happily. They don't seem to be affected by that by oh, I'm decapitated. No, they don't say that. They keep gliding. But the hammerhead ones, they take longer. It take longer, about a month. It depends on the specifics.
I was just thinking about the being able to regenerate their head probably works well in conjunction with their mouth not being on their head. Because if their mouth was on their head, they would have to go a week without being able to eat anything. So I imagine if their head is cut off, they're like, well, I could still eat, so I might as well just keep it rolling.
Yeah, that makes sense evolutionarily. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Thank you.
I promise this is the last weird question about their heads regenerating.
Oh no, no, but you keep going.
Because when you said that they grow back smaller, that just like that it was like a flower that just bloomed like 100 more weird questions. Is that like every time after that their head will regenerate smaller? Like, does that limit the amount of times they can regenerate their head? Maybe it would work better if I explained. So you have a regular planarian that has never regenerated its head gets cut off, that head comes back smaller.
Okay.
If that head then gets cut off, does the next one regenerate even smaller than that? Or is it like a one consistent size?
Okay, I'm gonna give you your favorite answer. I don't know. I've never tried that experiment, but you're actually giving me very good ideas for when I go back to the lab. Because the thing is that there seems to be a variation in the ability of different species of planarians as far as their head regeneration abilities. Some of them are very good at it. Some of them, as I said, are so-so. Some of them do not regenerate at all. And there's been a series of research from other research groups that they can identify the genes that are responsible for regeneration in one species of planarians. They put them in a planarian that does not usually regenerate, and they make that planarian able to regenerate.
Mm.
So it's fascinating. I mean, that topic is fascinating, but but that's not something that I do in my lab. I want to learn how to do it. I want to learn how to do those kinds of biochemical experiments.
It reminds me a little bit of axolotls.
Yep.
Reminds me a little bit of that, but it seems like that, but they've refined the technique like even better. Because I know there are some like axolotls kind of have a limit. Like, you know, you're not going to cut one in half and get two axolotls, right? But it reminds me a lot of that. Are there any sort of similarities between the processes?
They seem to be there studying that, and again, axolotls are remarkable. I agree with you because first of all, they're vertebrates. Okay, so they're much closer than planarians to us. Okay, and that opens the door of again, I don't do that research, but I know researchers, scientists who do this type of research with the objective in the future to somebody who may have their hand amputated because of a tumor or something like that to regrow limbs. Humans, we cannot do that, but people are doing research aimed at that at some point.
Something that we talked about when we talked about axolotls was that it reminds me of Deadpool, which applies even more when you said that they grow back the little tiny head, because in the Deadpool movie he like grows back his hand, but it's tiny.
Tiny hand, yeah, yeah.
I wonder if they got inspiration for that from the Planarians.
Who knows? And who knows? I love Deadpool, by the way. He's highly inappropriate, but it's really funny.
Just a very quick aside about Deadpool, since we stopped there along the way. We were in the movie theater watching the Deadpool movie, and in the middle of the movie at some point, he is talking to somebody and he is reminiscing about some mission they went on that culminated in something happening at the TGI Fridays in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where we are. And so me and Christian looked at each other and we were like, what? What did he say? Jacksonville, Florida is not the kind of city you hear referenced ever. We looked at each other in just complete shock. And then after, when we were walking out, we were like, you know what? I bet it was one of those things that they do in movies sometimes where they'll include a scene where they will edit the scene based on what city the movie is being played in, where like they'll send a different copy out to different cities that have a line swapped out to like localize it. We were like, that's gotta be it. Like they just edited it and like whatever city you're in is the city that they say in that scene. And we looked it up later and no, it was in reference to Jacksonville, Florida, and we were like losing it. I'm sure if we were like a big city that people knew about, we wouldn't have thought twice about it, but we were flipping out.
It's fun. Now that you mentioned your city, can I say hello to a friend?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if your friend listens, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure he listens.
Very good.
No, I want to say hello to Eddie, Sergeant Eddie Reyes, a retired U.S. Army. He's my best friend since like 30-something years. We were college buddies since 1980, none of your business. And and he lives there with his wife, Kaori, and their son, Alex. So hello, guys.
So the last thing we were talking about before I got distracted was we were talking about their little heads. And you mentioned that it's very cute. And that brings us into our final category to rate Planarians. This is aesthetics. And this, you can be as arbitrary and objective as you want. This is purely your opinion on aesthetics for the Planarians. What do you give them out of 10?
Of course, I am very biased, but you gave me permission to be biased. So out of 10, I give them a 12.5.
They're cute.
Of course, yeah, because, I mean, they are really cute. You just got to admire their structure, their physiology, their biochemistry. Some of them, they actually don't look traditionally cute because some of them, they look essentially, well, like science fiction monsters. And I'm sure to their prey, they look like that. Okay? But what's not to like about a squiggly worm with googly eyes? Okay, so that's one thing. And second, many of them are, again, brightly colored. Many of them, they have different shapes. Their adaptations are remarkable. So at many different levels, again, at 12.5.
I think that a lot of people, when they think of worms, the sort of knee-jerk reaction is to associate them with like icky things, right?
Yep.
Like worms are always assumed to be dirty and slimy, because I think usually people are thinking of earthworms.
Yep.
Which honestly, earthworms are not that gross, y'all. If you look up close to them, they're kind of cute too, a little bit, if you really like look at one.
Absolutely.
But so I think that looking at some of the really cute little head shapes and silly eyes of the Planarians, I think could win some people around to Team Worm. Yeah. You mentioned that some of the marine ones are like brightly colored. What kind of like coloration do they come in?
A wide variety. You can see them blue, red, green, orange, striped. There's, again, a wide variety of polyclads out there. And I consider them some of the most beautiful animals in the sea, with the possible exception of, oh, brother, I forget which ones they are, but they look like bunnies.
Oh, yeah.
Those are prettier, I got to admit. But polyclads are beautiful, most of them at least.
Is there any sort of relation to like nudibranchs?
Not that I know of. Not a close relationship, that's for sure.
I was thinking, because when you're talking about like being bright and colorful, of course, I'm thinking of like the pretty little nudibranchs that you'll see swimming around sometimes. They're always the ones that everyone likes to post beautiful pictures of.
Yeah.
Are there any, you mentioned that like they have this aposematism to be brightly, brightly colored to indicate to their predators, like, don't eat me, I'm very poisonous and you will die.
Uh-huh.
Are there any posers that imitate that? Like, I know with a lot of poisonous animals, sometimes another animal that's not poisonous will evolve to like mimic it. Is there anything out there like that? Like any sort of Planarian imposters?
You ask the best questions.
I'm sorry if this is a weird one.
No, it's not. No, don't be sorry, because first of all, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I suppose that can be the case, because that's a rather common phenomenon in nature, as you said. And wow, you're making me think so hard. I like you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I always try to tell people, like, I'm not going to stump you.
Don't ever apologize. Don't ever apologize for putting ideas in my head. So, I love thinking.
It's something that I like to tell people that maybe don't have a connection to, maybe there's not anybody that they know in their lives who's a scientist. Something I like to tell them is like, you can just go talk to them. They're super chill. Like you can just get on Twitter, get on Instagram, get on whatever social media you like to use. You can find a scientist and you can ask them questions. And even if they're dumb, they'll still be nice to you. Like even if your question doesn't make any sense, they will still be super nice to you. And, you know, that has been like one of my favorite experiences, like just being able to do this show and being able to talk to experts and pick brains and get crazy answers to crazy questions, because I've found that that's my experience, is that, you know, like people like to ask questions and people like to share knowledge.
Absolutely. That's I mean, we love talking about the things that we do. I mean, that comes with the territory. I have the best job in the world because, you know, as a professor, I get paid to read about what I like. I'm supposed to talk about what I like, and the students have to listen to me. So, you know, and again, you're absolutely right. If you ever, any of your listeners want to approach a scientist, don't hesitate to contact any of us. As again, there's going to be some not so nice people. There's going to be really nice people, but for the most part, scientists are nice people who want to talk to you.
I know there's a lot of people out there who like their specific function is communicating science. And science communication, I think, just like through the prevalence of social media, has just become so much more accessible. You know, like you don't have to necessarily enroll in a class and pay tuition at a university to hear from a scientist. You can go on like Skype a scientist, or you can go on social media and connect with one. My experience has been delightful. Everybody that I have corresponded with so far that, you know, comes from their field of science has always just been super, not only like receptive, but proactive about like, oh, you asked me one question, here are 10 other things you might want to know about.
Yep.
It's very exciting. And I know that, so you have, other than, I know that you've been kind of making the rounds lately. You've been doing a lot of science communication. You were on Ologies very recently, which was really cool. It's a little bit less safe for work than our show, but if anybody wants to hear a little bit more, they can, while their kiddos aren't around, they can go listen to Ologies. But you've also done a lot of other really cool work. You've got books out there and stuff. Why don't you talk a little bit about some of your other work that's floating around?
Sure thing. Well, you're absolutely right. Science communication has blossomed in the last few years because of blogging, podcasts, you know, all these type of things. I started blogging almost 10 years ago. My blog is predictably titled Bold Scientist, for obvious reasons. Those of your listeners who haven't seen a picture of me know that I have a beautiful bald head. So that's where the name comes from. It's boldscientist.wordpress.com. And I'm also at Twitter at boldscientist. So I've been blogging about general science for almost a decade. And I like to do it in an accurate, precise, yet respectful way. I don't like patronizing people because anybody with the appropriate interest can learn science. Science is not just for a few selected priesthood or anything like that. No, anybody can be a scientist. Anybody can do science. So in 2012, I began toying with the idea of writing a book. And that meant a lot to me because I've always been a bookworm, because again, it comes with the territory. But I thought about writing a book. So I again went and educated myself. So I don't have an agent. I don't know anything about that. But I learned that academic presses, they can accept proposals without an agent. So I did my research. It was going to be about planarians. That's the first book was going to be about planarians. So, and I sent a proposal to a few places, and I said, listen, I've never written a book. I've written a bunch of papers. I have this academic preparation. I'm thinking about a book on this topic. What do you think? Okay. And again, just like when I applied to PhD programs, for jobs, some people, they say, thank you, no, thank you. But a rather unknown publisher called Oxford University Press picked up the book. And that was my first book titled The First Brain, The Neuroscience of Planarians. And even though it's from an academic press, that book, it's popular science. I used the little worms that I love as an excuse to explain neuroscience and pharmacology to the general public. Then from that, I got the writing bug bad. And my second book is titled Strange Survivors. That was from Ben Bella Publishers. This one is about surviving strategies in nature that go beyond paws, claws, things like that. I talk about electricity. I talk about venoms. I talk about cooperation, and I talk about regeneration. Planarians are in that book too. Now, from Ben Bella Books, my third book is coming in 2021, and you're gonna love the title. It's titled Drunk Flies and Stoned Dolphins.
Oh, yep. You already have my attention.
And it's about how non-human organisms engage in recreational intoxication. And I'm having a lot of fun writing that book because I found so many examples of animals that actually engage in seeking psychoactive substances in nature and self-medication. In a real sense, we learn how to get medications from nature by observing animals and the type of plants that they ate, all these type of things. And that's kind of what the book is about. And I have a couple of more projects in the way that I can tell you when the time comes. But one of them is about alternate ways of thinking about a brain. And a colleague asked me to co-write a book with him about bioelectricity, which is yet another thing that it's coming up. And I'm having fun explaining science to the general public. And I'm doing my little part to educate the public because we live in an increasingly technological society, and yet relatively few people know what science is and how it works. And this is essential in our times. And of course, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I mean, to you and your listeners. But it's a very important thing.
And we could have the next little Oné sitting out there, thinking about, maybe I want to be a scientist, could just hearing the voices of people that have experienced it and lived like the science life, I think makes it seem like a more attainable goal. So for people that, want to follow you on Twitter, you're on there a lot. You're super friendly and super easy to talk to. So I would suggest that anybody do so if you have any further questions about planarians that did not pop into my brain while we were chatting here. But so this has been just really delightful. And I've had a lot of fun learning about planarians.
So have I. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you so much for the work you do.
Aww.
We need people like you. And again, you're fun. You're delightful as well. And God bless. I mean,
thank you. I really appreciate that. So I don't come from an academic background, so I'm definitely coming from like the general public's perspective. Like that's me. I just have a microphone.
But you're interested. You have the brains to do it, and you have that curiosity that cannot be taught.
Oh, do go on. Well, I appreciate all the time you've spent with us here today. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I know that you are a busy guy. You're in high demand. You're quite popular. So I will set you loose, but thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you so much. Stay healthy and safe, and my best to you and your family.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.